Welcome to our video. I'm Marshall Shannon with Ministry Design Concepts. I want to share with you over the next 30 to 40 minutes a catalyst for leading change in your church. It is a 6-step innovation process for ministry change. Let me ask you a question here as we get started. What is your situation at your church? The research has shown over the last several decades that 85% of our churches are either plateaued or in decline, that of the 15% that are growing, 12% of that is just growing by transfer of membership. New people moving into town who went to church elsewhere, or they're moving from Bob's church to Bill's church. Only 3% of our churches are growing by conversion rate, by people coming to Christ. And if you pull the biological conversions, meaning our children and grandchildren out of that mix, maybe that number is down to 1.5%. And so we're not doing very well. As you look at your situation, perhaps you're like I was. In my journey as a senior pastor, I looked at our church and thought, our people know a whole bunch. They know a whole lot. And I looked at our church and I said, we're not reaching our full potential. In our congregation, it was white collar. A lot of the people not only had college degrees, but advanced degrees, master's degrees, and a lot of them earned doctorates. And so we might have had 25% of our people or more that had graduate degrees, not just college degrees, and maybe 10 to 15% that had earned doctorates at our church. And that's not uncommon in our area because it's a highly educated area. And so I looked at that and thought we're not reaching our full potential because I realized we weren't connecting with the unchurched. And so when I looked at the Great Commission, the scriptures, and I saw the mandate for our church and the mission he had called us to, and I looked at what we were getting done, we were great about taking care of ourselves. 95% of the programs in our churches in North America are tailored to the church members, not to reach the unchurched and the dechurched. 97 cents out of every dollar in our church budgets are to benefit and serve and care for the church members, not to reach the unchurched and dechurched. It's very easy, and I think we gravitate toward that, and the gravitational pull is to be internally focused. So I looked at our church and thought, we've got to do better. And so as I analyzed it and wished that we could reach more people for Christ, and maybe you're right where I was, where I looked at our church and I just said, Lord, I want to reach more people for Christ. How do I do that? And I realized that if we kept doing what we'd always done, we were always going to get what we'd always gotten. And Albert Einstein said that the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. And so I knew that we needed to do it differently. If you're right where I was, then I want to encourage you to write down and take notes and to start praying through this process or one you might modify to meet your particular situation so that you can lead your church to doing things differently so that you can win souls and make disciples. When I looked at our church, and here's just my personal journey, as I looked at our church, I realized that, we had a lot of well-educated people. Many of them had grown up second, third, fourth generation of believers. They had heard the gospel while they were in the womb and were going to hear it until they were in the tomb. And in doing that, many of them came to Christ in their youth. But we were all scholarly. It was all information. And so I looked at the disciple-making process and thought, we really need to do this differently. Something has got to change here. Where are we off scripturally? And so as I looked at the way that we made disciples and knew that we weren't reaching our community as we wished, even though our church was growing, we really were growing by transfer of membership. New people moving into town, reaching them coming to church. They had been saved for some time, or there were people who got mad at somebody else in town and came to our church. Not the kind of growth that I was looking for and felt called to do as a believer. As I looked at that, I thought, we've got huge emphasis on on the big T, teaching. But what's missing was the second big T was training. And training is where, well, the big I is information. T and I, teaching, information. But the big T in the big I, the I is internship, investment, involvement, where a person takes the teaching and begins to actively carry that out, to invest themselves in the unchurched and the dechurched, to lead them to Christ and to make disciples that make disciples. And so I realized that our disciple-making process, it wasn't working. They were gathering, and boy, we bought into the big T. Sunday morning, Sunday school, teaching, Sunday afternoon, maybe training, Sunday night with another service to teach, and maybe an afterglow for the teens or some other group where we got together and shared and talked, and it was all information driven. Wednesday night prayer meeting became teaching time. And then we thought, well, we're still not getting there. Our people still are not growing and maturing as we believe they ought to. They were all head, no heart and hands. And I thought, hey, we've got to do something different here. What do we need to do? And, we had Bible studies for the women during the week, and the men and the singles and the teens, and special programs for the children. And we just kept feeding them. And indoctrinated them. We gave them information. We challenged them. But the training part was missing. And the third T was time, that they had to stick at this long enough. We kind of looked at everything like the educational model that we all used. It was a classroom with the master teacher and students who came, and it was a monologue where they taught, and if they taught well, the student responded well. We used that same approach for our evangelistic outreach, the master teacher and student. And in doing that, if we taught well, they'd respond well and come to Christ. The second approach that we've used in our churches is that of the salesman and the customer, the client. And now you've got a dialogue. You're going to use a series of questions and reasoning and emotional appeal to appeal to that person, to lead them in their thinking and in their emotions to come to Christ and devote themselves to Christ. The third way we've approached it is relationship, and it needed to be used much more, because out of the first two, the master teacher and the salesman, the retention level through the first year in our churches by the research that's been done was only 19% of those that we were leading to Christ stayed in our church through the first year. And you got the third big T in the disciple-making process of time. You need more time. We're growing oak trees, not tomato plants. And so as you look at this, we realized we needed, yes, to give them information, indoctrination, to teach them. And that's their head. The heart and the hands, the will and the service needed to come into part. So their spirit and soul needed to be a part of the process, and their service, the investment of their life through an internship into other lives to live out their faith, to invest in winning other people to Christ and making disciples was needed. Relationships. You want to guess what the retention level through the first year of new converts who've been brought into churches, what the percentage of those stayed? 79%. Okay? So in the first two, it was only 19%. 1 out of 5. But with the other, you got 4 out of 5 people stayed. So as I looked at this, I thought, we just got to do this differently. But change comes very, very hard. So let me continue with some introductory thoughts about this. And let me just ask you, is there a way to lead change without causing us to develop ulcers or to have a congregational revolt? Let me encourage you, I believe that there is. And I've had revolt. I didn't get ulcers, I may have, but I never knew I had them. Is there any way to discover innovative ways to do ministry and use them in your church? And the answer is yes. I've done it, and many other guys have done it. And some folks have written about it. Well, let me ask you this. How would you define innovation? Well, when I started researching this, I found over 30 different definitions of innovation and many more applications to the sciences or medicine or manufacturing or service industry or the educational industry, looking for innovation. Basically, it's a fresh way of doing things, maybe to a new set of people, or a new way of doing something, an old something, or something brand new. And so, well, let me use an example. I love cars and enjoy them and have restored them, muscle cars, with my sons and my wife. When Henry Ford started making cars, he did something different than the car makers had done up to that point. The way that cars were made was they were assembled by hand, one at a time, and you built them. And they ended up being so labor intensive, they were so expensive, the people who built them couldn't afford them. And Henry Ford looked at that, and he took the assembly line process, an innovative process, and mastered that. He developed it and mastered it where he could make a car so inexpensive that the men and women on the assembly line working for an hourly wage could afford the car that they built with their own hands. That's an innovation that changed America. It changed the way, the quality of life and our world. And at our age, we look and can't imagine a world without paved roads and automobiles. And now the automobiles, I think Audi just came out with a car this year that if you fell asleep or had a heart attack or seizure and couldn't drive, you take your foot off the gas pedal, it will autopilot over and park on the side of the road for you. It probably calls 911, I don't know. But it's innovative. Ministry needs to innovate because as the culture has changed, and surely in our country, we realize that we have passed from a Christian culture to a post-Christian culture. We minister in a different culture today than we did 20 years ago, 30 years ago. Innovation is a fresh way of doing something that adds value. It has value. It has impact. So is it possible to move your church forward without innovation? And so let me say this to you. You may find yourself tempted to do two things. I certainly have been tempted to do both of these. We look at our church and say, we're plateaued, we're in decline, we're not reaching our community, our congregation is aging. If we don't change and do things differently, we're going to die out after this generation is gone because we're not thriving and we're just surviving as a church, and we're headed out of existence. And so you look back at the glory days, and in your memory, your congregation remembers when the church was full, people were coming to Christ, the baptismal pool was full, and boy, everything was going great. And they say, if we just return to the old days and do blank and blank and blank and blank, we'll have the same results. And the answer is no, you won't. Those were methods that worked for that culture and that time. They're not going to work in the one we're in now. The second thing you may look at is you go, well, I'll just borrow somebody else's model. They've already done all the work. Let me just go buy it off the shelf. They wrote a book about it, and I'll just plug that in. So it's plug and play. You're going to mimic what someone else has done. You're going to borrow what they've done, and you're going to skip the innovative process of producing a new ministry model that will carry you into the next years, so that you can win souls and make disciples. And in essence, I'm challenging you with this. Are you not skipping the journey of your own disciple growth as you walk with God to discern His will for your ministry, and you partner with Him to discern and discover what's next for your church so that you can reach the unchurched and the de-churched and make fully devoted and developed followers of Christ? I don't think you can move your ministry forward by using yesterday's methodology and model, because your environment, your culture, your community, your context has changed. So innovation is important to any growth and success in the future as you lead your church. So here's the challenge from Steve Jobs. He said that innovation distinguishes between a leader and a follower. So if you're going to be a follower, not just a manager, but a leader, if you're going to be a leader and not just a follower, you're going to have to lead an innovative process that will allow you to draw a God-led conclusion of what your ministry needs to be, do, and how you need to carry out ministry in the days ahead. So I want to share with you a 6-step process of innovative thinking that will lead your church to a new ministry model to adopt, and it will be customized and individualized for your ministry at this time in your church's history. The first thing I would tell you to do is you need to examine your existing ministry model. You need to ask and clearly understand, what in the world are you doing? Well, you should be able to tell me, we're doing small groups or Sunday school, and we've got a worship service. It's traditional, it's contemporary, or it's something else. And we've got Sunday evening or afternoon small groups or worship service or training time or outreach time, and you're doing what you're doing. Midweek, if you're doing something, whatever is on your schedule with your programming and your projects, your events, and your activities, whether they're daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, biannually, annually, whatever it is you're doing, you need to clearly understand and examine what are you doing, and then how are you doing them? How do we do things? You need to answer that so everybody agrees. And then you need to simply ask, and this is not as easy to pull together, as who in the world are we? In reality, who are you? And what I'm talking about is your congregational code. We have developed a training series called Understanding and Discovering Your Unique Congregational Code. It answers in depth. What I'm talking about here is, do you understand the very essence of who you are at your core, the very soul of your congregation, your personality? Every group of people has a code, and it is both macro and micro. Let me use our country, the United States. We're Americans. We have a macro code, the way that we do government, our polity. But then you can break that down into regions. I'm in the Southeast. It's different than the Northeast. The way that our code is, we would say we could draw distinctions between the two regions. And then states, you're now getting micro. And then you go from the state having a code. I'm from Alabama. I was born and reared in Mobile. My family lives in Coleman, Alabama. There are distinct state codes about Alabama that is different than Maine. And so as we do this, you can even carry it down to the city. And when you go from macro with denominations, associations, all the way down to the church, and then ministries within that church, you go from macro to micro. And so your congregation has a code. Do you know what it is? If you don't, subscribe to our monthly ministry design division and go take the congregational code teaching. The training time may transform the way you lead your church. Matter of fact, guys who don't understand their code find out the hard way when they try to make changes, because it's easier to identify your code when you violate it. And then everybody is up in arms, and you've got the ulcers and the revolt going on. The second thing that flows out of your code, these build one on another, is your core values. The code is your person. The core values are your priorities. Then your mission is your purpose, what you're called to do. Then you have a vision. You're headed to a place. God's got a preferred vision that he has put into your heart. And as you look at that, what is God's vision for your ministry? And then you've got a strategic plan. You've got a game plan for carrying out your mission, your purpose as a church. And what is that? Have you done a strategic plan? When was the last time you updated and revised it? You also need to look at your culture, which is, is a part of your code, but you look at your culture, your belief system, your behavior system. Some things are taboo, other things are acceptable. How you do things, why you do things, how you think. Every group of people, they have a culture. A ball team can have a culture in the clubhouse. And you have your context. Your church, in your community, there you have your context that you're dealing with. You need to fully understand it, and you're the master of your own ministry model, of your own ministry design. But I don't doubt that you can tell me what you are doing and how you are doing, but do you fully understand who you are as a congregation? It's there that you can go to our website, subscribe to it, and get training on every single one of these in order to master exactly who you are. So as a part of the innovation process, this catalyst to leading change is to master who you are. The second thing I would tell you to do in my process of innovation is to then identify the fail points. So this is a hard question to ask. But where is your ministry failing? Where is your ministry failing? What and how is it failing? And you can look macro at your whole church and you go, we're not 3%ers. 3% of the churches in North America are growing by conversion rate. 12% are growing by transfer of membership, people coming from one church to another. 85% of the churches are either plateaued, they're stalled out, or they're in decline. They're shrinking and sinking, or they're just stalled out and stuck. And so as you look at your church, where are you? But what is not working? Where are you failing? Your leadership team must agree on what you will measure and how you will measure it. Because when you start to look and ask the question, where are we failing and what and how is it failing? Your temptation may be to look at the who, the people that you have, and say, well, we don't have the right personnel. When really you look at your whole program or your whole project or your processes and realize it's not really connecting to make disciples that make disciples. And so as you look at this, it may help you if I break your church model down into 4 areas. So you can test every area and see what's working and not working. So the first area is, are you reaching them? Secondly, are you keeping them? Thirdly, are you building them? So what's your outreach like? What's your assimilation process like? What's your equipping process like? And then are you releasing them into ministry? So as you look at this, you've got to ask and really identify the fail points. By the way, if you don't have any up-to-date goals for your people to shoot forward toward, you know what they say, ready, fire, aim. Well, you just, if you fire your gun and you don't have a target agreed upon, anything you hit is good. So you need to set the targets and the goals and then measure whether or not you reached your target. Did you hit your target? So as you break down your ministry and your church into these 4 areas and begin to really examine, where are you failing? This is hard to do because don't let it go into personalities, into the who. Keep it the where, the what, and the how, and look at your processes, your programs, your projects, your events, and your activities, and see if it's even designed to help you fulfill the Great Commission, to help you fulfill your mission. Because you've got a code and core values that your mission is to be done within, to help you fulfill your mission so you can reach your vision. So you want to ask the hard question. And the hard question is, why is our ministry failing? Why is our ministry failing? And you can do it micro. Why is our children's ministry failing to win more kids, win more parents, bring in their siblings. Why aren't we reaching our community? Why aren't we keeping those we reach? Why aren't we building those we keep? Why aren't we releasing our church into our community to make disciples that make disciples? And when I say make disciples, I'm referring to winning them to Christ and reach, all that comes with that, and growing them up into Christ-likeness and releasing them into ministry. I am talking about winning souls and making disciples when I say make disciples. So you're going to ask that hard question, what's failing and why is it failing? That's why I encourage you, don't necessarily get into who. It's not that you don't need to address it, but sometimes the church looks at this and just wants to blame the senior pastor or the assistant pastor or the ministry director over a particular ministry in your church, and it isn't working, and you don't look at your processes, your program, your projects, your events and activities, and you're blaming the people instead of those things. I'm not saying you might not need to either do a lot of revise the way you train your people, or you might have the wrong people. That's very possible. But as you look at this, I would look at your processes first. So here's a summary of the questions I'm asking you, just so you can grasp these, get your mind wrapped around them. What are we doing? How are we doing it? Who are we? Where are we failing? And why are we failing? We're through the first three points of this, and now we're going to get into the fourth one. And that is for you to explore some optional solutions to answer the question, what do we need to do different? Innovation can be, and I'll get into this, can't get into it in just a moment. It can be where you're just going to take something you're doing and do it a little different. And so you want to explore the optional fitting solutions that fit your context. They're fitting solutions. And ask the dream question, what if? What if we did blank? What if we created a ministry to blank? What if we changed blank? And so let me take you through 5 levels of change and talk to you about the cost of each one of these. Because innovation means that you can do several things within the definition of an innovative process to once again begin to win souls and make disciples in your church. You want to do something different so you get a different result. Restoration is just taking what exists, your existing model, and just polishing it up. Or you can refurbish it, where you kind of replace some things and clean. You're not just cleaning it up. It's like taking a house and washing the walls and washing down the doors and deep cleaning the carpet and the walls and the ceiling and the light fixtures and the ceiling fans and the doorknobs and the sink and the stove, and pulling out the refrigerator and cleaning all the gunk out and cleaning all the junk out of the closets and the storage area and getting rid of that stuff, and you've restored it to its original luster. But that original luster may not work, even though it's cleaned up. Then you refurbish it, you take it a notch further, and you're going to paint the walls. You're going to replace a doorknob. And then you move to renovation, and this is where you're going to make the place look completely different. You change the furniture, you paint the walls and replace the carpet, the flooring, you change out the light fixture, and then the third one is much more painful. You're going to redesign. So your innovative process may just be cleaning up what you've always done so that it can run better. I've done that to the car motor, to my homes. You refurbish it and take it a little bit better, where you're refurbishing what is there and you're replacing parts. And then when you renovate it, you're going to change out the furniture, you're going to change out the window dressings, you're going to change out the clock on the wall, the bookshelves that are sitting in your study, you're going to change out your desk and chairs. You're renovating it so that it is new. It's the same building, the same model, but now you've just kind of gutted it and gone at it. Redesign deals with repurposing the space. You're repurposing your ministry design through a redesign. And then the last one, which is the most painful, is replacement. You take out your current model of ministry and replace it with a new model. The highest level of pain comes a replacement. The second highest is redesign. The third highest is renovation. With refurbishing and restoring, you may not get much pushback at all because people haven't been required to pay any cost for it. It hadn't cost them anything. And they're still continuing really as they were with it. Just everybody appreciates the house being cleaned and it being refurbished. But when you start renovating, you're getting rid of some stuff and you're replacing it with new stuff, and now the pain starts and the revolt begins to gather and generate revolt and pushback. And so you want to explore the options. Look at the what ifs. What if we did this? What if we did this? How would it work if we did this? And out of all of those, and this may take a period of time for you to really think outside the box and to begin looking, and you can borrow brain. But what is God's mind on the matter? How does he want us to do ministry differently so that we can win souls and make disciples? It leads us to the fifth step. And the fifth step is you've got to settle on a theory, a theoretical solution. Out of all the options that you've looked at, you've got to settle on one. And so why is this step an important part of the catalyst to change? Well, the leadership approach is critical to your success. A lot of guys just do the Lone Ranger approach. They'll go through this process or one like it by themselves or just their, the top three guys in their church. And then they just want to go present it to the church and ask the church to accept the change at whatever level you're asking them to change. And they haven't had the benefit and pleasure of going through the whole process with you. And so I would tell you, don't use the Lone Ranger approach. Use the team approach and begin pulling in. Think of a circle inside of a circle inside of a circle inside of a circle, and you're going to expand the involvement as you bring people in and give them the same opportunity and privilege and benefits that you've got by bringing them in. And it means your process is slower, and as a leader, you're not going to use the leadership that often is used as one of position and power and authority, and you're just going to say, well, you do this because I'm the pastor. When real leadership goes and doesn't rely on your position and your authority and your power plays, but relies upon your dealing with people as they come up and push back at you from the very beginning of this, and you have to address competing values because you're going to have them in your church. Researchers, as they look at people, and one that wrote the Diffusion of Innovation, he started writing it in 1962, dealing with farmers in Iowa. He's revised the Diffusion of Innovation research book 5 times now, and the last one was done in the mid 2004, 2005, I think. In that, guys have looked at how groups of people pan out when it comes to adopting change. You've got the front end, 10% that are early adopters, and then you've got 30%, 35% that are normal adopters, and then you've got 35% that are late adopters, and you've got 10% or whatever that are never adopters. They're just not going to change. And so as a leader, you have to begin addressing the competing values and thought processes and people's hearts and minds to help them see what your model is and what you're doing and how you're doing it, and then to address and help them go with you to identify the fail points and help them then look, why is it failing? And take them through the process with you so that you can move your ministry forward. And this means as a leader, you're going to have to deal with conflict and competing values all along the way. So you invite people to join you in solving the problem. Go and share with them, look at what we've not accomplished. Look at where we're failing. Help me determine what are we doing that's not working and why is it not working, and what might we be and do differently to once again align ourselves with God's way of carrying out his great commission at this season of life for us in this church and this community. So you're going to contextualize this to your situation. And it means thinking innovatively. Once you've decided on your prototype that you think is God's mind on the matter, then you're going to test it. And you may give it a road test, a drive test. And so you take it for a test drive. And you put it together. And by this time, you've worked through where the people are accepting it. The never adopters may leave your church, sit quietly, or seek to cause a revolt. But you're going through this because you know if you don't win people to Christ, if you don't do that, and you give in to the never adopters, let's say you've got a town of 20,000 people, and you've got 100 people, and 10 of those people are never going to adopt any ministry model but the one they've grown up with. Are you going to sacrifice the 20,000 people there in order to make the 10% or the 10 people happy who are just causing a ruckus? And we deal with those in the coming days in our Leading Change video series that we're working on to help you point by point address this. And so you test the prototype, but you've done it in a way from the very beginning that has invited and involved and invested your congregation in this as a family. You want to use focus groups, perhaps, to help you analyze the prototype. So you want to go ask people, both in your congregation and those in your community, to see, as you test drive this, is it going to work? You're not coming and demanding that they adopt, your church family adopt what you have decided is God's will on the matter. You involve them as a leader and lead them all the way through the process. You say, is that more work? Oh, yeah. Is it more work? Is there more opportunities for conflict and conversation and competing values to be dealt with, and hearing their grievances and helping them through their fears and anxieties and helping them see what's important to God and realigning your church with a biblical approach to ministry and mission? Because here's the truthity. The truth is people gravitate to marry their methods and not their mission, God's mission for them. They'll divorce their mission and marry their methodology. And so this is the way we've always done church. We can't do church any different way than this. And whether you've got small groups or Sunday school or some other method of educating them, and they've been doing it for decades, they're probably married to it. And they have gotten off mission. They've had mission drift. And they have divorced God's mission for your church and married their methods. And they think that keeping it like it is what's important, or we're off mission. And they're wrong. And you've got to help them see it. It's a part of your leadership as the pastor, and a part of your leadership as a disciple maker who is going to disciple the people in your church, who will in turn go and make other disciples. Lead the way. The sixth thing you're going to do after you've given it a test drive is you're going to launch that new ministry, and you're going to have that opening day, and now you're going to replace it or modify it, and you've adapted what maybe you've done, or you've got a whole new ministry model, and maybe you should give your new ministry a new name and create a distinct culture for it. And you want to use maybe new vocabulary, a new set of symbols, and a new explanation of the concepts, new procedures and policies, and so forth that you're going to set up in this thing. You want to organize it. In our, you get it if you subscribe, and it's cheaper in the long run to do it that way. Just to subscribe and stay, it's $25 a month for you, Pastor, to subscribe to our ministry design division, or your whole ministry team can do it for $50 a month to give you access to the teaching. But we did one that's 6 parts on organizational science, and we created a checklist with 89 points to the checklist to help you organize your operational manual so that you do ministry both efficiently and effectively, so that you can win souls and make disciples. So every program, project, event, and activity in your church ought to be well organized so you're doing it decently and in order. So give this new ministry model that you have now adopted as a church the best opportunity to successfully win souls and make disciples. And then I believe you want to celebrate the change and launch your new ministry. Then you've got to do something. And the mistake you may have made through the years, you and the pastors before you at your church, is that you took your thumb off the pulse of God as to his thinking, his leading, his guidance, where his heart is. You took your thumb off the pulse of your congregation and your community. So then you want to continue to monitor, because a part of your procedures, policies, processes, and your operational manual is to give goals and targets, not just tactics and actions there to take, but goals. So you monitor so you can measure your success. Then you make modifications to it and manage it. And as you keep your thumb on the pulse of God, your congregation and community, and things change significantly enough in your context, you're going to have to go through this innovative process as a catalyst for leading change. You're going to have to go through it again. Because every 3 to 5 to 7 years, it'll be time for you to look at, all right, we've been doing it this way for a while. Things have changed in our community or in our congregation, or God is leading us to do ministry in a different way. Because you can't keep doing ministry the same way and expect a different result. Well, I'm Marshall Shannon, a ministry design coach. Here are our 2 websites, my email address, and both our phone numbers. You're welcome to reach out to us as you wish. And I would encourage you to subscribe or to stay tuned for our Leading Change training series that's going to take and pull all of this together. Much of what you need is already on our Ministry Design Division training series. You subscribe to that, and you'll learn about code and core values and mission and vision. You'll learn about how a church changes as it grows and develops. You'll learn how to lead through that. So let me invite you to consider subscribing, and if not that, buying our individual products that we offer one-on-one. We take what's in our subscription and offer it one at a time. Lord bless you as you move ahead. I trust the Lord will give you courage, make you persistent, and endure as he would test you through leading change in your ministry.